presented by Pavilion Energy Session 1, you may like to know, is entitled Reset, Advancing the Low Carbon Energy Transition. It is now with pleasure that I welcome on stage, ladies and gentlemen, Minister for Manpower and Second Minister for Trade and Industry, Singapore. Please welcome Dr. Tan See Leng.
Good morning, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to be here today. The energy transition is central to climate change, and it's timely that we've gathered here this morning to discuss Asia's role in advancing the energy transition. Asia is home to over half of the world's population and a quarter of the world's economy, and will be the major contributor to the world's energy demand growth. In the long term, the International Energy Agency, IEA, projects that electricity consumption in the region will double by 2040. There is a pressing need to facilitate Asia's energy transition to sustain economic growth and to improve lives. And Asia is already responding to the demands of an increasingly carbon-constrained world. Now, many Asian economies have set emissions reduction targets and renewable energy goals. For example, China has pledged to achieve carbon neutrality by 2060. This energy transition, however, will not be an easy one. The current energy crisis unfolding around the world demonstrates that it is insufficient for countries to switch from fossil fuels to low-carbon energy sources. Governments must transition in a careful, calibrated way and must ensure energy security and reliability. Singapore is committed to playing its part in this global movement. This morning, Minister Gan Kim Yong, my colleague, spoke about Singapore's energy transition and outlined our plans to decarbonize the electricity generation. We will tap on renewable energy beyond our shores and collaborate with like-minded partners to explore new energy solutions such as hydrogen. In Singapore, we believe that the energy transition is a collective, regional, and global effort. It is only when we work with other countries that we will be able to achieve our collective climate goals. Singapore has always been part of the Asian growth and sustainability story. Today, I will share some perspectives of how Singapore intends to navigate the energy transition and the role we hope to play in the region. And I hope that our experience may offer reference points for the region. With limited natural resources, Singapore must be resourceful, and we must find creative ways to harness energy. A key prong of our energy transition strategy is to invest in technology and innovation to address our energy challenges and sustainable development objectives. We have set aside resources to fund research proposals to develop and test bed promising low-carbon energy technologies. Minister Gan mentioned earlier this morning that we will be increasing funding support and will be setting aside 55 million Singapore dollars to fund research projects that are focused on improving the technical and economic feasibility of low-carbon technologies. To maximize the impact of our efforts, the focus of research and development is on solving problems that are specific to Singapore and to the region. In this, we actively encourage academia and industry to come together to develop practical solutions. Keppel Infrastructure and the Nanyang Technological University, NTU, recently signed an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, to develop technological solutions on decarbonization and the circular economy, including in smart grids and digital energy solutions. EMA and JTC Corporation, JTC for short, will also be launching a $6 million request for proposal to test bed renewable energy storage systems and low-carbon solutions on Jurong Island. This will help reduce carbon emissions and bring us closer to transforming Jurong Island into a sustainable energy and chemicals park. Successful R&D outcomes in this area will help us to deploy energy storage solutions at scale, and it will allow us to deploy more renewable energy resources while mitigating the effects of intermittency. Earlier, Mr. Blomart also shared ExxonMobil's plans to create carbon storage hubs in Asia's heavy industrialized cities like Singapore. We appreciate their efforts and we welcome ExxonMobil to work closely with stakeholders in Singapore and in the region on low carbon technologies. The global emphasis on sustainability and the energy transition offers new economic opportunities as industries decarbonize their operations and pivot towards more environmentally sustainable initiatives. Bain & Company estimates that going green could bring up to $1 trillion in annual economic benefits to Southeast Asian economies by 2030. Singapore can contribute to Asia's clean energy journey by serving as a base from which clean energy companies can deploy their solutions in the region. Singapore is already a choice business and innovation location for clean energy companies. To provide further support for local companies' push towards greener initiatives, Enterprise Singapore, or ESG for short, rolled out the Enterprise Financing Scheme Green earlier this month. Under this initiative, ESG will provide 70% risk share to catalyze the lending from partner financial institutions. This will help to facilitate better access to green financing for Singapore companies and support the growth of Singapore's green economy. The government will also play an active role in nurturing the growth of green energy companies. I'm happy to announce that EMA and Envision Digital have signed a memorandum of agreement to collaborate on programs to grow local energy enterprises in the areas of renewable energy, urban energy efficiency, and low-carbon solutions. Participating enterprises can also leverage on Envision Digital's digital platform and international customer base to expand their market reach and grow their businesses in the green economy. Ladies and gentlemen, I've spoken about Singapore's domestic initiatives and how they can contribute to the energy transition efforts. However, international collaboration and cooperation is critical to ensure effective action on environmental sustainability and energy security. Singapore has thus been playing an active role in international forums such as G20, COP26, and ASEAN summits, just to name a few. A key focus of our international engagement strategy is to learn and contribute to the international discourse on best practices and capacity building. With ASEAN, our focus for regional energy cooperation is to enhance connectivity and market integration. Under the ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Cooperation Phase 2 in 2021 to 2025, ASEAN countries have agreed to the collective and aspiration target to have 1/5 or 20% of ASEAN's energy mix comprising of renewable energy. ASEAN members are also working towards implementing an ASEAN power grid. Singapore, together with Laos, Thailand, and Malaysia, have made steady progress on the Lao PDR Thailand Malaysia Singapore Power Integration Project, or LTMS PIP for short. This will act as a pathfinder towards realizing the greater vision of an ASEAN power grid. The first 100 megawatt of electrons are expected to flow in 2022, and I'm hopeful that we will have an integrated electricity market in time to come. The shift to renewable energy solutions will need to be supported by fundamental infrastructural changes. As chair of the ASEAN Regional Energy Policy and Planning Subsector Network, Singapore will continue to facilitate more knowledge building and capacity building and sharing in this aspect. Singapore remains committed to play our part in a global effort to address climate change. Situated at the crossroads of Asia and the world, Singapore stands ready to work with our regional partners to contribute towards the region's efforts for a more sustainable energy future. By focusing on the deployment of low-carbon technologies, seizing green growth technologies, opportunities, and forging stronger collaborations between like-minded countries, the region can transition without harming the green goal growth. Thank you once again for being here, and I hope and I look forward to the fruitful and engaging discussions later. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tan, for your sharing. In fact, Dr. Tan will be back a little later on for the panel discussion. At this point in time, ladies and gentlemen, for his keynote address, I'd like to invite up on stage the Chief Executive Officer, Pavilion Energy. Please welcome Mr. Alan Heng.
Good morning, ministers, excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here at the Singapore International Energy Week. My thanks to the Energy Market Authority for putting together this platform for an industry discussion at a very interesting moment. This time last year, JKM, the Asian benchmark of spot LNG, was around $6 per MMBTU. Last week, JKM for December was trading at around $35 per MMBTU, more than 500% higher than a year ago. In recent weeks, the European gas benchmark, TTF, has hit a high of 160 euros per megawatt hour, while JKM was as high as $50 per MMBTU. These prices, by the way, are equivalent to crude oil being sold at more than $200 per barrel, a level that's never been seen before in the industry. And we have just begun to enter the winter months, which usually brings about higher prices. This price volatility of natural gas is not normal. The gas and LNG industry has historically done a very good job at bringing the cleanest hydrocarbon fuel at an affordable price. Aside from geopolitics, there were several reasons behind this surge. LNG plant outages, some as a consequence of COVID delayed maintenance. Lower output of wind and hydropower in Europe and Brazil, respectively. The strong post-pandemic recovery. Low gas storage, and importantly, an increase in gas use as we move towards cleaner fuels. While this has impacted the marginal cost of short-term gas, thankfully, many customers in Asia, including in Singapore, have term oil-linked contracts. And as such, the benefit of lower gas prices of between $10 to $12 per MMBTU. You can see that red line represents a closer view of what a typical Asian gas buyer is paying, as opposed to the sharp increase in the green lines. However, many of my customers in Europe have had to pay much higher gas prices during this period. I would like to offer two observations. The first is that the recent turmoil in global energy prices highlights how interconnected our global energy systems are and how volatile it can be. The interplay between the availability and prices of clean energy, gas, coal, power, and emissions has resulted in a constantly changing energy mix and heightened the volatility. In Europe, we witnessed how low wind power led to increased gas use, lower than normal gas storage, and subsequently higher prices, which interestingly led to greater coal use and higher emission prices to compensate for the use of coal. As a result, oil and coal demand has been boosted, especially with the expectations of a cold winter ahead. High gas prices have further led to the closure of fertilizer plants in the UK and building materials factories in Europe. Together with the anticipated increase in logistics costs, there will be consequent impacts on food, on building materials, and eventually prices for the man in the street. As Singapore diversifies its sources of energy through deployment of solar, importation of power and gas from a variety of sources, we become more connected to the global energy systems. And we will have to manage variables that could impact the stability and affordability of our energy supply. The second observation is that the situation has revealed the challenges of energy transition. We have built a system of energy production, be it gas, oil, or coal, processing facilities, liquefaction plants, terminals, regasification plants, refineries, storage, and transportation over decades. That system has served us well. However, these systems need to remain resilient even as we make the necessary energy transition. Low gas prices in the past years and the energy industry's pivot away from fossil fuels have reduced investments into gas and LNG. And as such, some have reduced their maintenance, affecting reliability. Others have not invested at all. So there have been no significant new investments in gas and LNG aside from Qatar's 30 million ton expansion of the North Field. LNG projects takes time to build, and the pipeline of new projects is limited. As such, even as we pay attention and give investments into renewables and carbon abatement technology, we must balance this with development and support of the use of natural gas, at least until such time that renewables are ready to play a greater role and a more stable role in our energy mix. Recently, we saw how countries have reverted to coal and oil-fired generation to avoid the high price of gas. It is estimated that the global coal use has increased by 20% in 2021. Now, this is important in developing markets where energy needs to be not just reliable, but affordable. So in the short term, the priority for us as an industry is to create more coal to gas switching and to allow gas-fired generation to be able to integrate with renewables. Pavilion Energy believes that this way will help lower carbon emissions while ushering these markets onto a greener pathway. The direction towards cleaner and greener energy is clear, but the transition requires a balanced and measured approach. This approach needs to minimize huge volatility in the energy markets, which may have the unintended consequence of retarding the adoption of clean energy. Against this challenging backdrop, the Singapore energy market has remained reasonably robust and well-served. In recent weeks, we have seen aberrations to what has been traditionally a very stable market. But I'm confident that EMA will work with the industry to address these challenges. As a supplier of both piped natural gas from Indonesia and LNG into Singapore, Pavilion Energy has been supplying more than a third of the nation's natural gas requirements. During the pandemic and even now, we have kept gas supplies flowing reliably into Singapore. And we are currently working with EMA and our customers to ensure that their domestic requirement continues to be well supplied, so that it can then bring reliable energy to the masses. Natural gas, as the cleanest burning fossil fuel, with strong availability, reliability, and a very established infrastructure, has earned its seat at the table. It is best placed to continue to serve as a baseload supply and one to deal with the intermittency that arises from cleaner but sometimes less stable energy sources. Gas and LNG are part of the energy transition, and we are not stopping there. At Pavilion Energy, we are committed to finding ways to ensure that the LNG we supply to our customers can be as clean as possible. In April this year, Pavilion Energy imported Singapore's first carbon-neutral LNG. With high-quality carbon offsets, we can supply carbon-neutral LNG and allow market forces to recognize the cost of emissions. And that will force us to drive improvements across the LNG value chain. Pavilion Energy has also committed with 3 major LNG suppliers to develop a greenhouse gas methodology for LNG cargo supplied to Pavilion Energy in Singapore. The outcome would be a statement of GHG emissions accompanying each cargo delivered into Singapore. The transparency around emissions will pave the way in helping us decarbonize along the value chain and contribute to a lower carbon future. We look forward to sharing this methodology with the industry in the coming weeks. Pavilion Energy is also committed to transition to become a merchant of cleaner fuels. Today, we help our customers with gas and LNG, be it into the industrial sector or to the marine sector. But going forward, we will be progressing into areas like ammonia and hydrogen as the technology evolves. This will ensure we stay relevant in the transition process in Singapore. In conclusion, as energy systems become more interconnected, both physically and through markets, we can expect more variability and increased volatility. Energy players working with regulatory authorities will have to be extra vigilant in managing the energy transition. So even as we look forward to a future of clean energy, we should not lose focus on the current systems that provide stable, reliable, and affordable energy. Our goal as an industry must be to pursue environmental targets aggressively, but in a responsible way, by safeguarding the resiliency of the energy supply. This is not a sprint, it's a marathon, and we look forward to progressing on this journey with you towards a cleaner and brighter future. Thank you.
From Pavilion Energy, Ellen Heng, we thank you for your sharing. Our next keynote address, ladies and gentlemen, will be broadcasted here virtually. I'd like you to welcome Chief Executive Officer, Envision Group. Here is Lei Chang.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, it's Lei Chang from Envision Group. It's my pleasure to virtually attend today's meeting. At the moment, I was in London, so I just finished the UK Investment Summit, and I'm hiding for COP26 for the efficiency of energy and to reduce my personal carbon footprint. I think the virtual attendance will be really be effective. So today, I think the world is having the biggest challenge ever, the climate crisis. So the carbon dioxide density is around 420 ppm. So if we can recall the last time in the history of the planet is about like 4 million years ago, the Earth have this same carbon density. But at that time, the sea level is about 25 meters higher than today. And the temperature is around 4 degrees higher. So the humanity is really at the danger of a big catastrophe. And so the net zero transition is a must thing to do in the shortest time. From Envision perspective, so net zero transition is indeed a great opportunity for the human society. So firstly, this transition is going to lead the energy transition. So we are moving away from the fossil fuel energy to the renewable energy. So the nature of renewable energy, actually, it's not the commodity energy. It's about technology. So we can see wind, solar, plus storage is becoming the new coal and the new gas. And the hydrogen and the battery is becoming the new oil. Once this distributed renewable energy and fragmented battery and EVs shape the future energy system. So we have to deal with the intermittency. So the Internet of Things is becoming the new grid. So from the new oil, new gas, new coal, and the new grid, so we are building the new technology, which is technology follows the Moore's law. Then you can see the cost of energy is decreasing every year. So compared 10 years ago, wind and solar has almost dropped 60 to 80%. So we expecting that renewable energy cost is going further down for next 20 to 30 years. Comparing with the commodity fossil fuel business is almost driven by the imbalance of a supply demand. So you never can really enjoy the very cheap fossil fuel energy once the imbalance of fossil fuel coming again. That's what you can see the oil price and the gas price pick up. But the renewable energy is different. As long as they are abundant, they are everywhere. We just need to harness it. So this transition for the energy is going to open up a much blue ocean. In the history of energy transition, every time, if we move away, when we are moving away from woods and straw to the coal industry, which is the first energy transition, the energy industry become much bigger. When the oil business and the gas sector is starting, so the energy is become the new energy industry, it become even bigger. Now, if we see the renewable energy become the mainstream of the future energy, we could expect, which is open an even big energy industry. So lots of possibility with much lower cost of energy. We can use the renewable energy to do lots of things. So my second point is, let's not to just focus our view on the energy transition. Actually, it's the industrial transition or industrial revolution. So every time in the history, the energy revolution will bring the industrial revolution. When the first energy revolution coming, so the steam engine and the steamboat, steam trains, and also machinery are coming, which is push the development of the industrial system. So also for the second one, for electricity and oil energy revolution. So a new set of industry, like a petrochemical business, has been built up. So this time, so when the renewable energy is become the dominant energy for upstream, so then the use of renewable energy is going to create a totally different industrial system. We are going to use the hydrogen refinery steel. We are going to use the electrical vehicles, ammonia-driven long-range ship, hydrogen-powered airplane, and the synthetic biology, which is going to be based on the green ammonia, coming from green hydrogen, which is eventually coming from renewables. So we see so big change and so many new industry is coming up. So that's the real exciting things humanity is going to embrace. So in such a situation, so we can see most of developed countries or even developing countries are aiming for, by the middle of the century, to be net zero. So then we have two ways to choose. One is to follow, or we can choose to lead. Because to reach this net zero commitment, you either follow, we are lead to that. But if you lead, you got the opportunity to build the ecosystem, to develop the best practice, to train the talent, to accumulate the knowledge, and to really to have this first move advantage. So United Kingdom is example. The Green Revolution, they are developing through the offshore wind energy to the battery manufacturing, to EV development, to stop this fossil fuel cars by 2030. This kind of acceleration is helping United Kingdom building the early mover advantage. So we also can see some case around the world. So from this perspective, I would like to give my suggestion or observation for Singapore's transition for such a industrial and energy transition. Firstly, I think it will be very meaningful to import the extreme low cost of renewables. So if we see in the past, the first industrial revolution starting with Manchester. Why Manchester, not London or Netherlands? Because Manchester is close to the coal mining place of northern part of England. So which gives them such access to the low cost of energy. So now when the renewable energy stage coming, so Singapore have such a geographical advantage. So in the past, Singapore is close to the Middle East, but now the weight could be shifted. The Australia have such abundant wind energy and the solar energy will give Singapore the very good access to renewable energy there, and even developing the hydrogen and green ammonia to Singapore. So then what can develop? So people may say Singapore don't have too much green renewable energy, but at the same time, or also in the history, Singapore doesn't have the fossil fuel energy as well. So you import gas and coal or gas and oil from Middle East. So same thing. So you build the petrochemical business in such a wonderful, size. So with the early move advantage by importing and developing green hydrogen and green ammonia, Singapore is able to capture the opportunity to develop the synthetic biology, which is going to disrupting the petrochemical business in the future. So we see the trend is already, because at the end of the day, we are not going to use the coal, the carbon underground. Otherwise, we cannot achieve net zero. This is one thing. So you can develop a new sector of synthetic biology, and or you, in the short term, can using the green hydrogen and to decarbonize the petrochemical business. Also, using green ammonia, which is Japan is doing, is to power your gas turbines. Ammonia can gradually replace the gas for power to providing stable electricity. Secondly, what we can see is there's some potential islands surrounding Singapore. Some islands is nobody living, so we can potentially developing the satellite energy island, which utilize the solar storage, hydrogen to providing the stable and the secure green energy supply to Singapore. And these two measures is bring Singapore the advantage of renewables. Then the purpose is building the advanced industrial system based on the advantage of renewable energy system. And the third point, as I mentioned, is the new grid. Because Singapore is geographically center of Southeast Asia. So we can see this trans-nations high voltage transmission lines or hydrogen's ammonia energy hubs. So to utilize this IoT system to harness the energy flow, at the same time to harness this energy usage for the city to decarbonize from electric vehicles to HVAC. So this could be a very interesting, development to make Singapore ahead of the current competitors. So we see there's tremendous opportunities ahead rather than challenges. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Lei Chang. In fact, we'd like to invite you to remain online. Invite you to remain online because he'll be part of the panel discussion, ladies and gentlemen. Joining Lei Chang as well online, we have our live panelists. I'd like to invite them up one at a time. This, of course, will be the panel discussion for session 1. So for our online viewers, not to forget to click on session 1 as well. This would be for Reset, Advancing the Low Carbon Energy Transition. I'd like now to invite up on stage Dr. Tan See Ling, Minister for Manpower, Second Minister for Trade and Industry, Singapore. Ms. Au Kah Peng, Chairman, Shell Companies in Singapore. Mr. Wong Kim Yin, Group President and CEO, Sembcorp Industries. Mr. Martin Houston, Vice Chairman Tellurian. And moderating this session, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome up on stage Managing Director, Digital Lead Resources, Southeast Asia Accenture, Mr. James Cheng. Good to see you again, James.
Thank you.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to mention as well that should you have any questions for our panelists, please use the app and the Q&A tab is right there. And do choose session 1. James, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, and a very good morning to Lei, who I believe is in London. It's 4 o'clock in the morning, is it for you?
Yes.
Thank you. And welcome to the panel, Dr. Tan, Ms. Ao, as well as Martin and Kim Yin. Let's get straight into some of the more interesting questions. And Minister Tan, if I don't mind, I'll start with you. Well, one of the things that we've been seeing is that most countries have actually pledged a lot of their transition by reducing the reliance to coal. I mean, you mentioned that. And natural gas is clearly one of the key roles in that transition fuel. You mentioned in your keynote address earlier on the role of natural gas in Singapore's energy transition. Maybe if you could give us a bit more color on that.
Sure, thank you. Everyone can hear me? Yeah, good. Now, today, natural gas makes up more than 95% of our entire energy mix. So you find that it will continue to play a very important role moving forward in the foreseeable sort of years ahead as we scale up our plans in terms of the renewable energy deployment, such as solar power, and even looking further afield into hydrogen adoption, and also the lower carbon alternatives like hydrogen and CCUS, which is the carbon capture utilization storage. What it does in terms of natural gas is that it allows us to achieve our goal in terms of providing a very sustainable energy mix as we move towards that transition. It's also reliable, and I think amongst all the fossil fuels, everyone here knows that it probably is the cleanest amongst all of them. So I guess for us, well, I mean, moving forward, I think what's important is that we continue to maintain this energy security, this reliability, but at the same time, it has to be sustainably priced for our businesses, our retail, and also our households and consumers. Now, what has happened, I think, is that given the fact that we have to import all of this natural gas, and even moving forward in terms of renewable energy, I think it's important for us to also consider to continue to move ahead in terms of the diversification of the sources of supply of these natural gas. And hence, you can see that what we have done in terms of building the entire ecosystem, we've worked with the different companies in terms of sourcing the supplies. In addition to piped natural gas, we've also got the liquefied natural gas and so on. So that security, that reliability, and also to ensure that it's always sustainably priced. Now, we hope that this industry players will also move along with us. We want to also continue to empower them to ensure that they can capitalize on some of these growth opportunities in the region, and also ensure that the smaller scale LNG and also some of the offshore LNG technologies can also tap into this ecosystem. Now, having said all that, I think this process of leveraging on natural gas still produces carbon. So obviously, we want to also transition and pivot into alternative energy sources. For instance, like what I mentioned earlier on, solar, low carbon energy technologies such as hydrogen and carbon capture. Some of these technologies are still quite nascent today, right? So I think that in the years ahead, we hope that we can collaborate with more industry partners. We can also collaborate with academia, with a lot of R&D initiatives. We work with Shell, we work with ExxonMobil, Pavilion, Sembawang, Keppel, everyone, to try and see how we can accelerate the development of some of these technologies so that progressively, as we reduce the reliance on natural gas, these other technologies can come up. Once that pricing reaches a bit more parity, I think the adoption of those newer, cleaner alternatives will start to accelerate.
Yes, good. Thank you. Martin, I want to follow up on that because we spoke earlier on, when we met about the criticality of natural gas in this whole process. Maybe you could elaborate more on that.
Thank you, James. So look, we need a sensible transition, but we need a transition that's supported by policy and by real solutions to providing low-cost, sustainable energy for 8 billion people, not just 1 billion people. And natural gas is that fuel. As the Minister just remarked, it's the lowest carbon emitting hydrocarbon. It will be the last hydrocarbon standing in the system, but we cannot continue to develop new hydrocarbon natural gas facilities if we do not have policy support, if we do not have financial support, and if we continue to demonize natural gas as part of a general attack on hydrocarbons, we will not have the investments, and we will continue with the energy crisis that we're suffering this winter if we do not invest. So in short, we have to recognize that by 2050 and by 2060, hydrocarbons will still be in the system. They are not going to be removed from the system because there is no alternative today. And recognizing that, let's embrace natural gas as the natural and only sustainable partner for the transition. Let's invest wisely, let's invest sensibly, let's make the policies support those investments, and let's get behind natural gas partnering the decarbonization on a global basis for the whole of society, not just the OECD, which is fortunate enough to be able to have this debate.
Yes. Kim Yin, do you agree with that approach which is laid out in terms of the transition, and that it's I don't want to use a stopgap measure, but in a way it is. How do you feel about that?
Yes, just a little bit more from my own perspective. 20 years ago, Sembcorp brought in piped natural gas.
Yes.
Today, Sembcorp is the largest importer of energy and natural gas into Singapore. So if you remember, before that, we were burning high sulfur fuel oil to generate power. So there was one step jump, and Kaping can testify to that. She was with EDB, right? We brought in the natural gas has actually enabled us to take one big step towards becoming more sustainable, right? And moving forward, I agree with Martin, and of course, Minister's view that this continues to be very important to us. Today, you see all these upheavals in the markets, right? These are coming from, I would call transitional pain, right? It will be many, many rounds of transitional pain, if you ask me, before we eventually reach, the holy grail of becoming totally carbon-free. And during this transitional pain, natural gas is a natural anchor, right, even as other types of solutions needs to be there to complement and supplement. For instance, interconnects. If you got interconnects, then we can better manage demand and supply across a bigger portfolio. Storage. If we can have better storage, and of course, the cost of storage has been reducing. Sembcorp operates one of the largest fleets of batteries in the UK. And what we're learning there is that it is very important. It's one of the most critical elements in managing the high intermittency coming from a large portfolio of wind and solar renewables entering into a grid. So natural gas being the anchor, and storage and interconnection helping to take out the peaks and troughs so that then we can manage the transitional pain towards the longer term. And I personally is a little bit more optimistic, and I think I can afford to because I'm in business. Minister has to be, we make sure that we never go out, right? So I'm personally much more optimistic. I think in 10 years' time, you will see hydrogen, green hydrogen, getting into the range whereby the cost will be viable. Today, it is really very much feasible. So, just a month ago, we entered into an arrangement with Chiyoda of Japan. They are into the midstream transportation of hydrogen using MCH, metachlorohexane. So I'm not the chemist, but it is already feasible. The point is, and then with scale, you can see the mega projects in the Middle East, in China, as well as in Australia, upstream. With scale, costs will come down. So I'm very optimistic about the transition. And I think, I just want to echo Minister's point that I think Sembcorp can be that regional player that can help Singapore as well as the region transit into a sustainable energy future.
Thanks, thank you. Lê Xiang, I want to focus on Envision and what the group does, because Kim Yin has just mentioned a very important point, which was that it takes a lot of different components, storage, generation, maybe even demand forecasts and control. How does technology play a role in that whole management, if you like, right?
Yeah, I think it is, as I mentioned, the renewable energy, the nature is about technology. It follows Moore's law. So for example, the green hydrogen. Now, in Inner Mongolia, the real cost we are estimating is now $3 per kilogram. We are already being able to reach that today because we are able to produce the green electricity, the green wind energy cost around 1.5 to 2 cents per kilowatt hour. And we are able to produce the electrolyzer below $200 per kilowatt. So, which is green hydrogen is economically feasible today. So we could see this could happen in Australia. Also, you can see Middle East, they are developing green hydrogen with big solar farms. So technology is, you have to have this long-term forward-looking. So if we look back, 60 to 80% cost reduction achieved. So if we look 10 years from now on, we can see another 50 to 60% cost down. So which is happening? So I'm in the middle of this technology for making wind turbines, for making batteries, and for making hydrogen equipment. I know how rapidly changing every day. So this is going to totally have different equation. So we have to, for our capex investment, for our long-term decisions, this have to put into most important decision criteria.
Thank you very much. Kaping, if I can just ask you, besides what we've talked about, technology, the rise of potential green hydrogen, what else do you think is necessary in Asia for this energy transition to happen?
Well, I think, it's clear to us that we have to pull every lever available to help energy transition advance and to act on it and not just, discuss and debate. So if I look at it, we've talked a lot about LNG. Today there's been discussion on CCS. Certainly the potential is there. I also see the opportunity for us to catalyze and build new energy ecosystems. So for examples, when we talk about low carbon products, look at circularity, look at sustainable fuels, fuels that are originating from sustainable feedstock and not fossil. For Shell in Singapore, we've already started that journey. A year ago, we said, look, we're going to start our pivot away from fossil. In fact, by now, we've already reduced roughly about half of our crude capacity. But the need to build those new ecosystems is equally important and urgent. So for example, how do we take waste plastic, which is clearly a source of hydrocarbon, how do we take it and then put it back into that system so that we can create circularity? Yeah, the infrastructure for collecting, sorting of waste and waste plastic is not really in place, and not in place at a scale that it needs to be in. And I'm not just talking about Singapore, I'm talking about the region at large. Likewise, if we say we want to build more sustainable sourced low carbon fuels, such as sustainable aviation fuel, where are you going to get the feedstock from? How do you collect them at scale, and how do you make it available at scale and sort out the supply chain issues so that ultimately we not only create cleaner sources of energy, but it has to be competitive. So I think that the twin objectives of having cleaner energy and competitive energy has to be met.
All right. Now, you talked about cleaner and competitive energy. Minister Tan, you earlier on talked about collaboration, the other C. Can you maybe tell us a bit more about some of the role of collaboration in advancing the low carbon initiatives?
Well, thank you. I thought that actually should really embody what this meeting is all about. Because I think for us to be able to make this quantum leap, collaboration, cooperation, they're very, 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 very critical success factors. Because today, I think when we organize, and I want to take this opportunity to thank all of you for coming to this, because I think it is at fora like this, which Singapore regularly participates in. SEAL Week, we have a team at the multiple fora. In fact, at many of these meetings, we're able to share best practices. We're able to learn from one another how to progress it in a very sustainable manner, and not make even knee-jerk reactions in terms of committing to certain targets. And I was actually quite also captivated by the earlier part about when we move into all this tech, renewable energy and so on, how do we carry the rest of the more disadvantaged countries and economies along with us? So that has to be sustainable over the longer sense. So I think it's at this kind of forum, and there are many of these fora going on, sequentially, some simultaneously, that we are able to then share what we know. And then that brings us to cooperation, that collaboration part. So academia then has to come in, research, development, looking at innovation, looking at technology to see how else can we then accelerate, for instance, the development of green hydrogen, carbon capture. How do we then use some of this carbon capture to go into utilization, storage? And I think Zhang Lei's point about how you can get green hydrogen at very low cost in Inner Mongolia, I think is a very promising and very, very inspirational piece. But I guess the point is that for a country like Singapore, Inner Mongolia is huge in terms of distance, compared to where we are today. How do we then transport that level of sustainably low price, competitive green hydrogen here for our utilization? I think those are key points that we need to think about. And it's through forums like this. It is through working with tech partners. And I think I mentioned earlier, Capital Infrastructure is working with NTU. They've signed a memorandum of agreement to see how they can actually go on. We are also putting in R&D into looking at our own geothermal point. I'm not sure if you know. It's not really it's quite a nice tourist attraction. In one part at Sembawang, our hot spring, we're looking at exploring whether that energy could be harnessed. And of course, in one of our offshore islands in Pulau Tekong, we are also exploring that as well. So it's through multiple things like this that I think would bring us to the next level.
Right, right. That's another point I wanted to ask you, Zhang Lei, which is around the collaboration between governments and businesses. What would be your advice in getting it able to make that transition to clean energy in a rapid manner?
Yes. What I'm thinking is very important is the government should set up the roadmap to decarbonization. If we think 2050 is a day for net zero, so we should set up each industry. For instance, the electricity industry, when will be the decarbonization? So according to this kind of roadmap and a milestone and a timetable is about mathematics. We can easily to calculate. It's not by essay. So once we finalize this timetable, which really to set these guidelines and create a market and opportunity for business. So this is the timetable milestone is the invisible hand for private business. So let's say if Singapore wants to be net zero by middle of the century, probably you have to be net zero for your electrical business. So your electricity industry have to be by 2035, between 2035 and 2040, which means 15 years later, now will be fully renewable energy in your electrical system or majority. So then today is only 4%. From the 4% to 94%. So when it's going to achieve which year, then the business can easily calculate, okay, it seems I should invest in the seasonal storage business. I should invest in the green ammonia gas turbines. I should importing more green hydrogen or developing hydrogen base in Australia. Although in the Mongolia is far away, but Australia have the same condition. We can access to Australia get green hydrogen. So this kind of things have to come with a timetable, a roadmap, a framework.
Right, right. Now,
Thanks.
Roadmaps, frameworks, approaches, plans. Martin, we spoke a bit earlier on again about potential headwinds and storms. What would you be, being the potential naysayer of what could go wrong, what would they be?
Well, first of all, as the industry has been demonized and the capital has been sucked out of the system, it's very hard to provide the sources of energy to sustain the transition. I want to divert you just a little bit onto one thing that has been touched on a little bit, but not really dealt with, and that's the big elephant in the room, and that is coal. I totally agree with the remarks that have been made already. Peng said it's multiple solutions. Alan Heng talked about the increase in coal consumption, 20% increase in coal consumption in 2021 alone. We've seen that in Europe. We're seeing people revert to coal. The statistics are awful. 191 gigawatts of new coal construction in Asia in 2020. Now, if we just look at the opportunity, oh, by the way, in the 3.1% energy growth that we're seeing today, 21% of that is coal. We have to tackle coal. Now, just to give you a couple of statistics, and I'll just read them from here. If we replace half of coal generation with LNG or natural gas, we'll get rid of 200 million tons of carbon emissions per annum. If we replace all of coal by 2030, which is entirely doable, by the way, carbon emissions would fall by 3.6 gigatons. So we are talking about massive impact here. So whilst I recognize that there are many, many technologies at play, there are many new opportunities for green hydrogen, which I fully support and subscribe to, but we can't tackle those until we tackle the big elephant in the room, coal-fired power generation. We have to tackle that. We have to replace it with gas, and that is an urgent agenda in my view.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have time for just one more comment, and I'd like you to take that, Peng. Given what the panel has been talking about, what do you think would be the opportunity here for us to galvanize ourselves and try to speed up and avert some of these crises that it's almost in front of us?
Well, I'd like to pick up the point that Zhang Lei and Minister had made about collaboration. He talked about roadmaps. I think creating that coalition for action is so important. So let's not forget, if you look at Singapore, we said, yes, small country, we have our constraints, we have our challenges. But, you know, if I give you a statistic, Singapore emits about 0.1% of the world's global emissions, but yet we're responsible for roughly 5% of oil product and energy products flow. Now, that's not small by any measure. And that's because we have important sectors like shipping, aviation, for which in many ways Singapore punches above its weight.
Yes.
So it is able to pull together the coalition that's needed for action, whether it's with government, you know, providing the roadmap and the direction and the visibility, but also, you know, with industry players like ourselves, academia, coming in to say, how would we move forward together? And in the same way, when we talk about CCS, if you look at Jurong Island, and that's personally a project that I was involved in for a very long period of time, we said, look, can we build a world-class industry? And look at what we have today. You can see it for yourself. Now, all the players on Jurong Island understand how it was built. Now, if we think of the capacity and the capability we already have, do we then know how to potentially look at something like CCS and figure out an approach? I think we can. So I would suggest that, you know, we have to take many of the things we're talking about today and bring it together into that coalition for action.
So we've got coalition, we've got capabilities, we've got competition, we've got collaboration, we've got cleaner and better sources. All I have to do now is to thank you for a very interesting and lively discussion, and thank you again for the panel. Ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, James, for moderating this session as well. Thank you very much.